And it helps if I unmute. Good day, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Benefits of Triage, how you can quick start your digital investigation, or the Benefits of Digital Forensic Triage. I'm your host, Rich Frawley, and let's get right into what we're going to be going over here today. So first, we're going to kind of step into what is triage. May seem a little obvious, but it's a good starting place. Let's just get going, build up the momentum into what we're getting in here today. We're going to talk about where triage started, getting into it, into the digital world, and the strategy of triage. Kind of a few of the things we need to do, we should be thinking about. Are we going to implement it? Did we implement it? Can we implement it? And getting into being successful with it. Okay, we can all do it. There's different ways. Triage seems like it's a really quick, altogether, in and out, but there's different ways that you can use triage, and you want to make sure that you're successful within each of those ways. Look at a couple of use cases, go over the things to remember, things that we went over, just make sure that they stick, and then we'll get into some questions and some wrap up. So you heard me talk here for about a minute already, right? Let's meet myself. I'm Rich Frawley. I'm the Director of Training here at ADF Solutions. I've been in law enforcement for 22 years, 17 of those years in law enforcement. I was a forensic examiner and investigator. I adopted triage early on in my career. I was a one-man shop. I was one of the first in the state. I was a police officer in Milford, Connecticut, and we were one of the first departments in the state to have a forensic lab. And actually, we were an ICAC satellite at the time, what they were called. So, all right, let's see here. Sorry for the delay. I don't see my screen moving in another view. Just want to make sure that everything's moving. If anybody's having any issues, we do have the chat and the question pane. So if there's any issues, please let me know. But anyways, I was a one-man shop. I had a large amount of work coming into the lab. My partner was doing the online undercover work, and we were doing cyber tips as well from the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And I was getting work in from other departments, being one of the first in the state to do this. We're having homicides, frauds, threats, and one of my favorites, a jury tampering case. And I was actually at a stop, NW3C class, secure techniques for on-scene preview. I was in a train the trainer class when I got the call about the jury tampering case. So you can see going way back that triage was part of my lab, if you will, early on. We adopted a policy to try where we could to weed out computers that didn't need to be seized. Both in the lab and on scene. Maybe they came in, we weeded out what didn't need to be looked through, or we were on scene, said, we don't need to take this. We did that. Again, I'm keep repeating myself, but early on. This goes back to boot CDs and network crossovers. We eventually got into the live and boot USB devices, used a lot of tools. We all needed to know the need for that stock toolbox, be it free or paid. I've been out there, but I've used them all. The number of devices has never stopped, increasing, and having that ability to eliminate or at least assign a priority to devices helps immensely. All this started developing into the ability to make decisions on scene, with a good old-fashioned, good combination of good old-fashioned police work and technical ability to preview and triage computers where they sat. And I always go back, you're going to hear this whenever I talk, it's not just the technology that gets us there. It's the good old-fashioned police work. You're going in, you're doing really good work. That work got you to where you are to be able to look at this. The technical comes second. Still a very big part, but don't discount that good old-fashioned police work. You're going to need it to put together a good triage plan. But we realized when we were doing this, right, we're going in, we're saying we want this computer, we don't want this computer. We're trying to, solve the issue in the lab for backlog. But we noticed we're developing a good amount of probable cause on scene, implementing this. It's not just there it is, but also there it is, and there's plenty of user intervention on the files that we're looking at. So we started making arrests that day. This in turn solved some of the exigency in the lab, took the bad guy off the street that day as compared to weeks or months. So anyways, that's kind of where I started with all this. And 5 years ago or so, I retired and I joined ADF Solutions. And great company, garnered several digital forensic patents more than 12 years ago, built its reputation as a triage company. With the roots in the forensic triage, the early years were spent creating software specifically for image identification and analysis for those child exploitation cases, with government and law enforcement agencies being the main driver that wanted this technology. The immediate value as a triage tool was in providing immediate on-scene intelligence and capture of potential evidentiary information. And it's since morphed into solutions that are just easier to use for investigators and helping reduce case backlog. So I said, we're going to get into, what is triage. Little short bit here on the origin and the benefits of triage, kind of take us from where it started to, where it fits in the digital world. So, going way back, we're talking, 18th century here, and it's the action of sorting items according to quality, right? So from the French to separate out or to cull, and all words that we know and understand. So you take the wool, you separate it out there, and if there were 15 bales, they'd expect 12 that were marked R, that's refined or prime. So they're triaging it and saying, this is the good stuff. This they're going to use for something else. And this, right on through coffee, sorting the berries into 3 classes: the best quality coffee, the middling, right? Fair to middling, right? Remember that? And the third, or the bad or broken berries, which was called triage coffee. So very simple, bringing it along. But let's move up now a little bit, in time, and first used in the medical sense in Napoleon's armies, right? So the doctor here, Dr. Dominique Jean Leray, sorted the battlefield casualties into 3 groups. Triage kind of means to break into 3 pieces. So in the battlefield, there were patients who would probably die no matter what, patients who would most likely live no matter what, and patients who would survive with immediate treatment, but would not survive without. So you can see how you're breaking this down into importance, rather than just the berries of the coffee being used. Now you're talking about lives and importance. And the current sense now dates, from the 30s, from the military system of assessing the wounded on the battlefield. And, moving through the 30s up until 2007 medical text, there's your different type of triage priorities, where your red triage would be those who could be saved, but whose lives are in immediate danger, requiring treatment immediately or within a few hours, right? So that's immediate, red tag. Go into your yellow tags, those whose lives are not in immediate danger, but who need urgent but not immediate medical care. You can wait a little bit while delayed, yellow. Your minimal, your green, you only need minor treatment. It's going to be a while, right? And then going into the 4th, and I know triage is breaking down into 3s, but there was this 4th category, whose conditions exceeds the available therapeutic resources. They have severe injuries. You're talking, radiation burns, things to such an extent and degree that they can't be saved in the specific circumstances of time and place, or complex surgical cases. And these you have, your black triage tag, or expectant, not going to make it, or no priority. So let's move on a little bit from there to today's definition and get us right into what we're going to be talking about. So the process of determining the most important people or things amongst a large number that require attention. And you can see where this absolutely fits into the digital world with all the devices and terabytes of data that need to be culled through, right? So that's what we're going to start looking at here. So as we look at the history of triage and how it has been and is currently being utilized, we can also look at the definition of investigate and see if triage fits into this definition. By using triage as a process, doesn't it kind of fit into our investigation? And I'll explain this further as we get into it. But to investigate, to carry out a systematic or formal inquiry to discover and examine the facts of an incident or allegation so as to establish the truth. Like I said, if we're triaging, we're also investigating. And I kind of, if we're going to put together a good plan and we're going to do this the right way, I think we need to start leaning a little bit, take triage and put a little bit more investigation into it. And you'll see what I mean as we go through this. So today's lecture webinar is going to cover the art of triaging or conducting an initial investigation of digital evidence. We're going to bridge a gap that sometimes lies between the investigator and the examiner. It's usually where triage fits in. And all use cases are different, but it's kind of where we're sitting at. As an investigator, we typically put a lot of hours into an investigation, especially to locate and get to the device that you're going to want to look at now. Or maybe that digital evidence is already in your hands and now you need the information on the device to further or continue the investigation or know whether this is worthwhile for you to even look at. An investigator handling child exploitation cases, right, such as cyber tips, peer-to-peer, human trafficking, you followed some sort of digital evidence to locate that digital device. Excuse me. Once you have that digital device in your hand, you want to continue to follow that path. You got the path, you got to where you are. Now you want to keep up and keep going and make decisions. You want to come to a logical conclusion sooner rather than later. In some cases, this evidence is going to sit on the shelf waiting for a deep dive examination, hindering the investigation and letting it become stale. Anybody's fault there? No, usually not more than, there's a lot of stuff to look at. So no blame here. And just think about some other cases where investigators called to a scene to find a suspect was involved, let's say the sale of illegal drugs on the dark web. You're in this house for whatever reason, and all the indications lead to a laptop in the room used to conduct these transactions. Most likely, it's going to be cryptocurrency. So does this computer get seized and placed in line pending investigations? Or can we get the investigator the information he needs or the information the forensic examiner needs that's going to further this investigation? Do we want to identify possible cryptocurrencies for seizure? We want to validate the initial findings on scene and follow up with preservation orders and search warrants if required. The more we know up front, the easier this type of case is going to be later on. You also have consent to pull specific information from a device. This falls under the triage moniker. Do we still need a profile of the computer and some other information to continue with the case? So I'm going to pull this information off, but I want a little bit more information that allows me to put together a more concrete report or a full picture and the ability to determine the next steps. Doesn't matter where we are, campus, customs, HR, parole, probation, special investigation units, private sector. We all need information fast to make decisions on. And triage, or these rapid investigations, allow for that to happen. Me coming from the role of an investigator and examiner, I was able to bridge that gap. I got the important relevant information up front. This allowed me to continue with the investigation and allow me to schedule those deep dive due diligence examinations in that first in, first out manner without having to triage my line at the beginning of every week or whenever somebody came in with something that was more important. It allows you to be able to do that. So relevant information up front, records organized for easy analysis, and comprehensive reporting with this information to continue your investigation. Just excuse me here. I have to fix something here. All right. Not every case is deep dive worthy, right? And the investigation may come to a logical conclusion with the specific information that was gathered from the device. If 90% of your cases can be solved with 10% of the data, let's get to that point early by targeting what you believe is the 10% you are looking for and make those decisions on how the devices need to be examined. Again, a deep dive due diligence or peace of mind searches can be done at a later date. This does not replace the deep dive examination. Does save time, save money, and save space. And this is both on the lab and on scene. Okay. Sorry here, I am just trying to confirm. All right. Okay, there we go. Sorry for that delay. I apologize. So quick history of going back and where, triage in digital forensics. Like I said, if you look back and you do a search on some of the text that's out there, you can go back as far as 2002, where I found some pretty decent text on forensics, triage and forensics. And like I mentioned earlier, I remember taking the stop class, Secure Techniques for On-Site Preview, back in 2006, right? And that utilized a Linux distribution, a Helix disk. I also used Tux and other tools. And as far back as 2001, I was using tools on scene. Preview has always been a part of the game, with the boot CD and network attached previews also being part of that. The different types that we're looking at here, triage is going to get you results that fall into the low-hanging fruit, your yes/no categories. It's meant to be fast, give you peace of mind, right place, right computer, have evidence. Triage typically finds a few pieces of evidence and gives you a bare bones report, if any report at all. There are different ways to conduct triage, and they're employed in many ways across the digital investigation or examination. ADF gives you these options and can be deployed and finished in minutes. So I'm bringing it back now to present. What we can do on scene, how easy it is now to put these triage programs in. Preview out there, typically using a full forensic suite, hooking up to the hard drive, previewing until something is found. Typically used in a lab setting, right? You're going to remove the hard drive, you're going to hook it up to a write blocker, you're going to open up your full forensic suite, you're going to look at all the images, you're going to scroll through. So it requires removing the device typically. It's beneficial, especially if you have trained examiners on site or somebody who's, technically savvy and can do all this. It does require, that the hard drive be removed or connected through network cables to preview. It's somewhat fast once the hard drive is connected. It finds low-hanging fruit, doesn't collect artifacts or produce a report. It's not parsing out all that information for you. And if it is, you're going to have to run some other kind of scripts and get that. And typically, the investigator isn't going to walk away with a nice report that's going to be able to let them continue on with the investigation. But it works, right? If that's for you, that can be done. Live scans, probably the most popular out there. Live scan, Windows, up and running. You're going to collect the RAM. And collecting RAM on a live machine should be the first order of business, as it contains valuable data, and it's going to be altered or overwritten during a live scan typically. A live scan is for scanning and collecting evidence in a short amount of time, looking for the low-hanging fruit, looking for encryption, stopping when the evidence is located, or stopping when a scan is complete, and imaging if needed on scene. It could be used in a lab setting as well as on scene, where digital devices will remain in place for the scan. And also consider your order of volatility here when collecting from a live system. Kind of mentioned at the beginning, you want to get that RAM first. Now you walk in, a little different here, especially with some tools, but a boot scan. If you're doing your live scans, you're probably not used to being able to walk in, see that your suspect's computer is there on the desk, but it's off. Right now, a lot of people have to revert to that preview or just bag it and tag it and bring it back. With boot scanning, you're able to plug in that USB device, plug into this, right? Scan, collect your evidence just like you were if it was live. It's in a more forensically sound manner. Live scan changes do get made. It's still a process. It's still a process you have control over if done right and with the right tools. Boot scanning takes it that one step. It is, you could say, 100% forensically sound. You're looking for that low-hanging fruit. You're stopping when your evidence is located, or stopping when your scan is complete, meaning I wanted to grab a bunch of information so I can continue on with my case. Used in lab settings as well as on scene, where your digital devices will remain in place for the scan. And then scanning forensic image files, same thing. Maybe you have a process where we bag and tag, we bring it back, we image it, and we worry about it when we have the forensic image files. Those forensic image files, even though you've done all that work, can still be triaged. Is this one worth going through? Is this one worth going through? And you can start putting them in the lanes, swapping them around as far as importance goes, which ones need to be first, which ones need to be last. So let's get a little bit into the strategy of triage here. So triage can be done in the lab as well as on scene. It has many benefits. right? Scanning multiple devices or images for cases where numerous devices have been seized. We've all been there. We've all walked into a house expecting one thing and walking out with 50. Uh, it's the way it is nowadays with devices. And now we're adding mobile. Well, now we are adding. We've been with mobile for quite a while now, which has its own, issues that come along with it. But when collecting this information with filtering and sorting capability, the analysis of multiple devices can easily eliminate devices with no specific evidence. And that's just as important as finding the one that does, right? Wherever your digital evidence lies is where the processing will take place. And just because digital device is in the lab doesn't negate it from being triaged and placed in a corresponding lane, like I was saying, or a priority list. By triaging digital evidence, we can obtain different goals by the importance and uniqueness we place on that triage. Specifically in a case with numerous devices, such as an investigation covering many locations and persons, the need to cull through that data, fast is first and foremost. The need to eliminate devices is just as important as the need to locate the devices. And it's at times like this when having a triage program in place could really pay dividends in backlog, time spent per device, and quickly getting the investigation on track. Quick story, sidestep out of here. We just put 150 frontline users through training. And I'll get to training and confidence here in a couple of minutes. We put 150 users through the training. Obviously, we're talking a big department. We're talking multiple locations. Learned how to use it. Within the first month of going out and implementing this triage program of making decisions on scene instead of bagging and tagging and bringing everything back, the first month they saved over 430 man hours in the first month. That's huge. And that was just a quick metric. There's more. There's more to this story. There's more time saved. But for a quick, what is this doing for me? That's huge. When you can implement that and get that kind of return that quickly, it says a lot. So that's one way of looking at it. Sorry, it went off on a story there. Let's look at knock and talks or consent searches. One of my earliest on-scenes investigations was conducting knock and talks in Operation Avalanche. Don't know if there's anybody still around who remembers that. It was 2000, 2001. But we were conducting a knock and talk, and it's, like I said, a combination of good old-fashioned police work and speed. I had the investigator and another forensic guy with me who did the talking with the suspect while I connected to the computer and started doing a preview of it. And back then, it's not as fast as it is now, but it was, you keep them busy, I get connected, I scan as fast as I can, and find what we want. And we did that. We saw what we wanted. We took the computer and we left. This was in the early days. Decision wasn't made on scene yet. It took a couple of weeks for that to get done. But anyways, if consent gets withdrawn, right, you want that collected information in your hands. You don't want to have to deal with a post-scan analysis or collection. You want it up front. You want it on there, because if they withdraw and you haven't actually collected, you were just identifying, it kind of falls out of the scope of that consent. So you got to be careful with that and make sure, when you're doing these, that you are collecting at the same time when that consent is given. All right. So sorting with triage, and we're going to go into threes here with our triage, what we're looking for digitally. If we triage and sort by the specificity of our results or the lack of specificity in our results, we can place our evidence into the correct lane for processing or completely eliminate the device at this point. This is a typical low-hanging fruit type scenario where the results reflect that several files meet the threshold required to seize or further process the computer. Your results are going to show the contraband, victims' names, IP address, stolen credit card numbers, etc. Where they were located, or that the results reflect zero evidence of the items being on that device. So you're doing your scan, you're going to be able to say, hey, there's nothing on here, leave it behind. There is something on here, it's actionable. Let's make a decision and seize the device. So I found the contraband. I not only found it, so we're seizing it, but maybe I can make a decision and show right then and there that this user had interaction with these images or this contraband. It was in a user created folder, and the good old fashioned police work got him to admit to that because you have the evidence over here. You talk to him about it over here, you put it together, he's coming with you, right? So it's good when you're doing this to be able to do that. Now, alongside of this, I'm going to go off onto a story where the tool was used. One of our task forces went into a business and they were faced with 75 computers in this business. 75 USB devices, one license. Hooked them all up, collected the RAM if they were up, they booted to the USB if they were down. Once RAM was collected and they were booted up or they were running on that live machine, they run their scans. One license, run around, they got all 75 running at the same time. First one finishes, they start doing their analysis and start saying which ones are staying, which ones are going, which ones are just going to be imaged. So decisions are made. You're taking 4 days worth of work and cramming it down into one with the way you're triaging, with the proper tools and with the proper setup. So going out and thinking about, being able to triage in these 3 different ways allows you to get in and out and get back to your life. So let's look at what we were discussing with triage or investigation. I mentioned it back a few slides. What is our purpose for being there? What does our wording dictate about our case later? I like to incorporate the word investigation as it tends to spell out the reason we're there and what we're doing. So remember, investigation is to carry out a systematic or formal inquiry to discover and examine the facts of an incident or allegation so as to establish the truth. It is part of the investigative process conducted by a trained, experienced investigator, such as yourself out there. So maybe your narrative can state, and I used to like adding things like this: I conducted an on-scene investigation into the contents of the digital devices located in the suspect's residence. My investigation included the collection of digital evidence from the devices in order to triage and eliminate unnecessary devices from being seized. This gives you more credence to the activity and places triage in the investigation. And you could also add further to my investigation, such and such a decision was made too. But you're laying out what you're doing with triage and why you're doing it in this short, paragraph. And who's not going to love when they ask you, about what you seized and what you did, and you say, hey, I went through everything and I left, the 3 little kids that were in the house, I left their school computers behind, pat me on the back for being a good police officer and having that interaction and the ability to say, I don't need to take everything anymore. We'll take bad guy stuff and we'll leave the good people in the house stuff. And most of the time when you go into these places, there's one person in that house who knows what's going on and everybody else has no clue. So if triage allows you, the compassionate policing, if you will. So you want to put the information in the investigator's hands. And I'm going to say that maybe a little bit different here. You want the investigation in your hands if you're the one out there doing this. If you're out there doing it for somebody else, if you're doing the collection for the investigator, you want to give them more information. It's going to make your job easier, your lab a little less hectic, and it's going to get somebody off the streets a little earlier. Triaging with the intent of using the information for further investigation and decision making leans more towards the investigative side of triage and places the data in the investigator's hands right away. The investigator can conduct a scan, analyze on scene, or a scan can be done and the results placed in a viewer, we call the standalone viewer, for the investigator to continue on with the investigation. This allows for the investigator to complete preservation orders, further search warrants, evidence tagging, arrest warrants that day. We used to do warrants first thing in the morning, afternoon, working on the report, doing fax and preservation orders to the internet service providers or wherever you found some other accounts, getting that stuff locked down now, not waiting for later. So you go in, you start scanning, you get your low hanging fruit in the first couple of minutes. If you're going to be there for 10, 15 minutes, let it run, collect a little bit more information, get your case going a little farther. And just think of the artifacts that could be collected in minutes to put to immediate use. And I'm talking minutes, right? So if we're talking our tool here, live machine, plug in the USB device, start it up, right? The first thing the tool does is make a listing of every file and folder that's on that device. That's important, right? We're only going to collect, we're triaging, so we're only collecting specific information. But when you do that, somebody's going to ask you, but what else was on that computer? 2 clicks, you print out a CSV report and you go, here you go. Here's every file and folder that's on that device. Have fun. In the meantime, here's all the contraband I found. Here's the web browsing history. Here's his downloads. Here's what he's talking about. Here's who he's grooming, right? Artifacts get parsed out in minutes. They don't take long. Listing of all files and folders, artifacts. When the artifacts are done in the first couple of minutes, then we go into file collection. We're already doing keyword searches in that against the artifacts. So if you have crime specific or unique keywords and you parsed out the web browsing history, as soon as that web browsing history is parsed out, those keywords are run against it. So it's doing some of your work for you in the background. Getting a little ahead, asking you to imagine a couple of things here, but it does a lot. So we're talking about minutes, just all these artifacts here that you can put to instant use in your investigation. EXIF data. Who hasn't looked at a picture and seen that there's a location embedded in that picture, an immediate look to see where that was? I know I've called departments all the way across the country and sent them out to houses with success. We went to that house and believe it or not, she answered the door, right? I tell you, man, if anybody ever knocked on my door like that, I'd sell my house. I'd be gone. I don't need anybody showing up at my house. But anyways, I'm getting ahead. You understand the information is there. USB history. Minute and a half, your scan's running, you're viewing results, you're seeing what was attached to that device. Hey, everybody doing the search in this room, keep an eye out. It says there's a 500 gig drive, but I don't see it attached to the computer here. When you're going through your drawers and looking under the pillows or the mattress, look for this drive, please. Just all the information that can help you in your case. And again, adding case or crime specific keywords is going to help you here. So being successful with triage, first, I talked about confidence earlier. Um, it's it's a big deal, especially when we're starting to talk about frontline investigators. You're starting to learn about this stuff. You're starting to come up, and you start to think, well, I'm not a technological person, or technology scares me. We need to kind of get a little bit away from that. Um, Technology isn't that hard. It's all in the way you're going to receive the training that you're getting. Now, I've been to plenty of trainings, plenty of good trainings, plenty of high level technical training, but I was able to be in that technical class and hear it. If I'm trying to get that technical information down to somebody who's just starting, we need to replay that, right? So let me talk about Frank that I used to work with. Frank's what you call a dinosaur. Frank wouldn't even turn on his computer to check his email. We went to a paperless world, or trying to, but email's the way in. He was terrified of it. We got him to turn on his computer. We got him to use Word for typing and printing out some things. We had to teach him email. And it was a matter of sitting down to him and relating to, Frank, when somebody sends you a letter, what do you have to do to go get it? I open my front door and go to my mailbox. Right. Press the icon and see what's in the mailbox, right? It's bold. It's darker than the other ones. That's your new mail. When you want to read it, what do? Well, I open it, with a letter opener. Okay. Double click on that. You just opened your email. What do you do when you send something? Well, I go to the drawer and I find some paper. Okay. Well, here you're just hitting new email. That's getting a piece of paper, and your pen. That's your keyboard. It was just a matter of giving him that. And within a day, we had Frank checking his email, sending emails, and it was great. And I started out my classes too with, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe a little bit more. Not everybody was growing up with technology. You had that big gap. You had kids that maybe didn't have it yet. You have kids that are growing up that have it, that have grown up with it, and you have parents that didn't have any, had no idea how to use it. Just about everybody now that's getting into police work has grown up with some kind of digital device in their hand. So we don't need to be afraid of that. If you could handle an iPhone or an Android and figure out where your apps are and the settings and doing this and doing that and applying filters on all these pictures, if you could do that, you could operate one of these tools in the field. But anyways, I went off. Even if it's simple, you still need to understand it, right? So we've all grown up with the technology. It's not hard. All our training is meant to build upon each other. You don't need to become an expert with one class, right? You're not going to take an expert class in order to start doing something. You're going to take your basics. Seizing electronic information, the legal authority to do it, preview and triage, tool specific. They all build upon each other. They all give you that confidence. Don't try to do everything at once. Don't be afraid of it. Kind of what I kind of talked backwards on these slides here. Don't be afraid of technology. You can relate it to anything in the real world. I'm sure a lot of us have taught kids about internet safety, right? So it's a little harder to identify maybe somebody online, who they are and what they are. But as far as taking care of them, and once you figure out that stuff, avoiding them is the same thing. You see the bad person at the park, stranger danger, you stay away. Same on the internet. If you don't know who it is, you stay away. That's what we teach our kids. It's you just relate it to, hey, if you were at the park and this happened, it's the same thing online. If you're at the park and somebody says this to you, you get away. If you're online, somebody says this to you, you get away. There's always a way to relate it. You just want to have that confidence with it. And I like to, no excuses. Technology is easier now than it's ever been. But whatever training you take, it should be a confidence builder. Think of boot camp versus, an operator. If you're going to be a frontline investigator running the tools. You want a basic understanding of the forensics. You want to be able to put your case together. You want to make sure you don't make any mistakes. A 2-week boot camp on digital forensics is not the place to start. You're going to build up to that, and that's where we want you to go. But just remember, put these things in order, and there's a lot of free stuff out, National White Collar Crime, right? A lot of free classes there, a lot of good building blocks within them. Nothing better than to be able to go in and say, hey, boss, this is what I'm going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And I'm going to save you some money by taking these 4 classes, for free. If you don't mind paying for the 5th one, that's going to allow us to do this. Great way to start running your lab, especially for your smaller labs. Is triage forensically sound? Move away from the training there for a little bit. Live scans are still a viable option and have also evolved over time. We're obtaining more results, quicker analysis, and comprehensive reporting. It's come a long way since the live, low-hanging fruit days, and it allows for more data to be gathered in a short amount of time. Now, Windows makes changes whenever a USB device is introduced. Windows makes changes. You're not doing that. Windows is doing it. Every time you execute a program, Windows makes changes. It happens. You can document it, right? We pretty much know what gets changed when that is happening. It can be documented as long as you're there for the right reasons. It's up, it's running, it may be encrypted. I don't want to shut it down. This person's dangerous. It's an accepted practice. If you're talking about procedures and the procedures you're going to follow, it's a forensically sound procedure, right? I plug this into the tool. I know that these things change. Windows changes this when you insert a USB. I know that Windows changes this when you execute a program. From that point forward, nothing else has changed. We have control of it. I collected RAM to preserve it, to keep what's there, and then I did a scan of the computer, right? You can easily document this. Dates, times, metadata is going to remain static. It's not going to change. Of course, you're going to validate your tool. And again, RAM at this point will most likely be altered if you're running a scan with any tool. It's going to have to do something like that. It may possibly alter the swap file. That's why it's most important to collect that RAM up front, and it's your first order of business. And the reason you're running that live scan, right? You have to be able to say, you're not just doing it, there's a reason for it. Because you can turn around, if it's not encrypted and you have access to that computer, you can turn around and do a boot scan, which is 100% forensically sound, right? But then we're into other things, that you got to learn about in these classes. How do I shut it down? How do I do this? How do I do that? That's all out there, but you have options. Like I was saying, triaging from a USB device in boot mode, forensically sound, 100%, nothing's going to change. There may be the rare instances where it doesn't boot to the USB device, it boots into the Windows. There's ways to get back there. Again, part of the confidence building and training, but just know you have options. And as long as you're doing it right, you're not going to have any of these issues out in the field. Remembering, what is your end game? When do I want my results? Do I want them in minutes or do I want them in hours? Well, if we're doing triage, you're going to want them in minutes. You're going to want to profile the computer and its usage. You want to probably determine probable cause immediately, on scene or in the lab. Specificity, you're going to want to have keywords and hashes or dates and times that you're looking for specifically. Not just throw everything out and see what you get. That's going to take a long time. The more specific you are, the better. And as long as we're conducting that triage of the digital devices, let's up the game. Let's investigate. Let's get a little more targeted, a little bit more specific, and put together in the report. gives you an up-to-the-minute placeholder in your investigation, a solid starting and stopping point, a place to move forward from, a place to update, to learn and make decisions in minutes and hours, not days, weeks, and months. What do I mean by that, right? You do a triage, you find some information, you make a decision on scene. It's a stopping point. I made a decision. This is what I found. I've put my case together. I've made an arrest. It's also your starting point. This is what I've done. This is how I've gotten here. This is what needs to be done next. It lets you continue that investigation, preservation order, search warrants, arrest warrants, further investigation, due diligence, putting no victim on a shelf, whatever you want to do next, you now know what you have to do. So spending those extra few minutes gathering more data that has been targeted specifically to call out what you're looking for, the uniqueness in your case, going to give you the ability to cover more ground, make solid decisions. Continuing the investigation with the artifacts and evidence, leading to preservation order, search warrants. I'm starting to repeat myself here because that's what you're going to be able to get out of it. Let me change the screen here, look at a little bit on the workflow. Workflow without triage: seize, image, process, analyze, report. Pretty simple. Workflow with triage: you're going to triage and either seize based on that triage. There it is. I see it. We're taking it. Or you're going to triage and report. Your decisions are made. Triage, seized it, or triage. I see what's on there. There's a little bit more I could put together. Probable cause. I can make my decisions. I can then do my report. From this point, right? Made a decision. From this point, I now have all this available to me. I can analyze, investigate, preservation, search warrants, arrest warrants. That's all the same day. Or I can now put this in line for a deep dive. I know it's going to need a deep dive. I know there's more information on it. I want to sweep out every corner of the case. Process and analyze what's already been collected, the logical, what was collected, put together your case that way. It may not need the deep dive. Maybe we're not talking child exploitation. It's some other kind of case. You've put it together. You've made your arrest. It went to court. It pled out. You don't need to go any farther. You're going to do your peace of mind. You may have put everything together and it's a lock, but you're still going to say, I don't want to put a victim on the shelf. I'm going to sweep out every corner. It's like the deep dive, but it's more a peace of mind. You're running everything just to put your mind at ease, even though you found everything you need at that point. And then you have the process, analyze, and report on specific evidence. This is why I have this device. I'm just pulling out this information, and that's what we're going to do. So there's a lot of different ways you could go with your triage. There are some considerations. Is it up to date? Do I have the latest release? Have I validated it? Do I have the hardware to support it? Right? And can I easily customize it? All things you need to know. You need to know your tools. You need to do a little research into it. You need to ask questions before you use it. Again, do you update? Is it up to date? Okay, it may be up to date now, but what's going to happen 6 months from now? Do you update? There's tools out there that aren't updated. You got to know that. You got to know what you may be missing because of that. What operating systems and artifacts can I get? Can I use it on Windows, Mac, Linux? Can I do a boot? Can I do a live? Validating. How am I going to do it? Is there a way with this tool that allows me to validate it a little easier? Do I know where stuff came from? It's automated. Automated's a little different, right? So is it telling me where it got that information from so I can easily go and validate that information? Hardware to support it. How much is it going to need? Is it going to be difficult? Typically with your triage tools, you're not going to need a lot, but just be aware when you're doing that. I'm going to come back here to uniqueness. Let's look at some of the specific artifacts and evidence that could jumpstart your investigation and keep you moving in the right direction. Many cases come down to the protection of children getting a pedophile off the street, seizing assets, making connections to other conspirators, and locating and preserving evidence that may be stored in the cloud or with other service providers. We want to be looking for the evidence that'll get you on your way. You're not looking for everything. I probably should have said that up front. You're not looking for everything. We need to keep it basic. We need to point to the stuff that we're looking for. We needed to keep it basic. You know your case better than anybody. And in your experience, you have found what you set out to usually in the first place, right? You know it, you know what you're looking for. So focus in on that and get the information that's going to get it done. We can look for everything later. This is time constraint. Start being targeted, start being unique. The first thing you want to do to get unique, right, is to review your reports, your notes, your interviews, your cyber tips, and pick out the keywords that are on point and unique. We want to keep the keywords as unique as possible to prevent false positives and added analysis time. The first unique item that most likely will be relevant is your IP address, right? This is an item of evidence that led you to the location of the suspect of the target computer. It's an indicator, right? Indicator of the correct place. And it is so unique that false positives usually won't be an issue with that. Use case-specific keywords, such as your child exploitation keywords and search terms, unique names, phrases, words in chat and email that help seal the deal. What do I mean by that? Words in chats and emails. You may have something that led you here, a conversation between two people. I've had it a few times, and they uniquely spell a word on purpose, or they use lingo, or they used a phrase. If you could pick that out and look for it on your device, especially if it's the evidence that you're looking for, that helps. It's unique. You're not going to find it on anybody else's device. You're going to find it on this device. You've researched IP addresses, usernames, victims, email addresses, social media. You have a good idea on what's being done. Pick out the uniqueness. Make sure that what you're looking for is what you are going to find. What type of artifacts are going to help my case? Keep the investigation, eliminate or solidify evidence, give enough information to report and give you a general profile of the computer usage. What did the review of the case show you? So, you could be looking for cryptocurrency, anti-forensics, remote access, cloud storage. These are all artifacts to consider. And I can't stress this enough. We need to be unique and keep it simple. We're not conducting a deep dive investigation. We're hitting on all the data that will keep us going, allow us to make decisions. Look at a complicated subject such as cryptocurrency. There's a lot to learn about that. And when doing a deep dive forensics, you're going to need to know that stuff. But what do you need to know up front so that evidence can be preserved and taken care of immediately instead of in weeks, right? Going into that house and knowing that cryptocurrency is on there and there may be wallets, and if your keywords point you to that, it's easier to tell the examiner so he knows now that this stuff is there. You can start making phone calls and saying, hey, we've got an issue here. You may have to come out to the scene now, or I'm going to keep this on and bring it to you. It's just as simple as what is crypto? What do we want from it? What evidence is going to be crucial? What's going to help me make a decision on the scene? Not the stuff that I need later. I don't need all the transactions at this time. I just need enough to get my case going and to allow it to be investigated and preserved should something else need to be done. So to start the process of triage your subject you know nothing about, the first thing you need to do is look at the subject and what do we want from it, what could be crucial, all the stuff that I was just talking about. But once you know it, just break it down to the basics. What is it and how does it work? What evidence is going to lead me to the fact it's being utilized? What can I retrieve in a timely basis? Wallets, funds. Is there anything I can grab on scene? If not, I need to bring it to the examiner. What keywords are going to help me do that? You're going to research all that. You're going to want to look for some of these keywords in your websites, in your web browser. Make sure you're searching your web browsing history, your chats, your web records, your email. If your keyword search for that, you're going to start putting a lot of stuff together. And in this case, here's another thing where you build on your classes. Maybe it's a good idea to know a little bit of regular expression when you get into this. Instead of looking for a specific keyword, you're now looking for a pattern, right? So it kind of helps key in on exactly what you're looking for. And other things besides cryptocurrency, anti-forensic, remote access, social media, cloud storage, peer-to-peer, all things that you can do. You don't have to do every one of these in every triage. It depends on what's going to be important and help you in your case. Sometimes doing a social media search on a triage is just going to give you too much stuff because everybody uses social media. But maybe you need to target the social media down to specific accounts that may be on that computer for preservation orders or usernames. So if you can get into there, it's really going to help you out as you move along. Putting all together, the keywords you want, should be kept in line with the speed you want to have the scans run. Sorry, I'm a slide ahead here. So with the keywords, this is what I was talking about here before. Over on the left here, I have a slide that shows CCleaner was looked for in regular expression. So it was a word boundary. It looked for CCleaner and it found it. There were 6 files with the word CCleaner in it. And it also found it in browser cache, browsing history, download history, installed applications, and search terms. All I need to do is look at my keyword hits here, and I know CCleaner is going to be an issue on this computer. It was installed, it was searched for, it was downloaded, and there's several files with the name CCleaner on it. So, good for you to know, good for the examiner to know. Same here over to the right with Shard Lake. If that's a person's last name and you're looking to see if they have a relationship with the person on this computer, well, I could just look at the keyword hits and where they are. He's a contact. There's 14 messages, 7 emails, 2 calls, 2 files in browser cache. Now, by clicking on this, I can go look at those. But just by looking at the hits, I say, yeah, there's a relationship here. Shard Lake is going to be an issue in my case, something to look for. Same down here with Tor browser. It's used, it's been browsed for, and there's recent files showing it's been started. Timeliness, putting it all together, keep that in line with what you're doing, keep your keywords unique, keep your hashes, I want to say to a minimum. You're going to put a lot of them in there, especially if you're using VIX category 1 or category 2, but you don't need it all. On a triage, you're not going to whitelist, right? You're going to want to use specifically what you're looking for. So you start getting hits quick, you start knowing what you're having, and that things are going to run. And as far as keywords, you don't want to search for the word black if your uniqueness is a username blackj248, right? There's a difference. So put in blackj248. If it's there, you'll find it. Have a plan, prepare your hardware, test it before you go out unseen. Test it before execution. There's nothing worse than getting out unseen and finding out that something is not right. And things to remember, and I'm sorry, I know I'm running a couple of minutes late here. Remember your goals. It's triage. It's an unseen investigation, and it's fast, right? Your goals are decision. You want arrest or elimination. They're both okay. It's both. It's okay to say there's nothing on this computer. We don't need it. It's part of what you want to do, right? You want to be able to report, and you want to be able to link artifacts if you can. Not only do I have a file, but where is this file located? It's located in a download history artifact, in recent file artifacts. I can see the path that it came from. It's user created. I can take it to a timeline. These are all the goals. Safety first. Photo and video when you're on scene. Disconnect the internet. Identify your devices. Scanning of devices and collection of RAM, all things we've gone over here, and then putting it all together. Quick analysis, determine and document your probable cause, and remember it's a starting and a stopping point. I'm going to, I know I sped through the last. I told a couple stories at the beginning. I want to thank you all for listening, for being here. I really do appreciate it. It's nice to see everybody that showed up for it, and I see you all hung in here. I'm looking over now. Thank you very much. Again, I'm Rich Frawley. I'm the Director of Training. There's my number. There's my email address. I'm here to talk to just as much as I'm here to give webinars. We at ADF come from the point of view, no frustrated user. You've got an issue, you call us, and we're going to get back to you as soon as we possibly can. We're going to help you. We know what it's like to be out in the field and have to get something done, or in the lab and need to get something done. So if there are any questions, please send them here. If not, you can send them to my email address. If I don't get them through here, then I will. If you send something, I'll send you an answer back as well. But again, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. I went over. I appreciate it very much. Everybody have a great rest of your day.